Good afternoon. Welcome to the second of our 2024 webinar series, Designing Timber. My name's Matt Milton. I'm Editorial and Publications Manager here at Timber Development UK. In a minute, we'll be hearing from the team behind the fantastic Durley Chine Environmental Hub. But just while everyone's arriving, I'm going to say a few short words about Timber Development UK. We're both a young organisation and a very old one because TDUK was formed in 2021, merging TRADA and the Timber Trade Federation, the TTF, to bring together every part of the timber sector, from supplier to specifier and all points in between. You can see our three key missions here. One is to connect the supply chain, another is to lead best practice, and the third is to accelerate a low carbon future. Now, we carry these out via events like this one and by our ever-expanding resources library and the work we do with policymakers and politicians to fight timber's corner. And you can see on this slide here a little snapshot of just some of the things that our members can access. Designing Timber there is our quarterly magazine. We also have another one called Supplying Timber for the supply side. That keeps our members informed about everything that's exciting and inspiring in the world of timber. We also have a great resources library packed with numerous case studies. You can see one of them there, which is also the subject of today's webinar, Durley Chine Environmental Hub. We also have our knowledge library, which features many timber knowledge sheets, and one of them there is the 2024 embodied carbon data for timber products, and I'm particularly excited about that because I think it could be a real game changer for anyone building in timber. It provides embodied carbon data based on average EPD figures for all the most common timber products. So basically, if you're building in timber, that's a great document to consult. You can also see timber policy there, one of a number of our publications. Now that looks at inspiring examples from around the world of how other countries are incentivizing timber, both nationally and regionally. You can download all of these from the TDUK website. While plenty of our resources are free, we do encourage people obviously to join us because yes, if you're building with timber, this really is where you belong. It really does pay to be a member. It allows you to access all sorts of things that non-members can't, and it can benefit your business in very direct ways. We've just launched a resource called Find Your Timber Partner, which is a great membership directory. Effectively, it's a kind of shop window for your business, wherever you are in the supply chain, and it will put you in front of all sorts of potential clients interested in timber. Do watch out for the other webinars coming up in this series. There's a great mix of projects from large commercial projects and offices to residential, domestic, one-offs and small projects. I also need to tell you about the Wood Awards. We just launched our call for entries. So if you have a great timber project that you've been involved with, please do enter. That's enough for me. I'm going to hand over in a minute to Mike from Footprint Architects, and we'll hear all about Durley Chine Environmental Hub. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Do make use of the Q&A function. I'd encourage everyone watching to ask questions from all our contributors today, and we'll do our best to answer them all. Without further ado, I will pass over to Mike.
Hi, my name is Mike Ford from Footprint Architects. I'll just share this window. So we are Footprint Architects. We're a company based in Bournemouth, and we work across education, commercial, leisure, and the residential sector. We have a focus on sustainable design, and we always try to be underpinned by site context. We worked with BCP Council and Seascape, the council's work team, on Durley Chine. And you can see here the location of the site and proximity to our offices, in fact, which made quite nice for site visits. And you can see the kind of location within the entire beachfront between Poole and Christchurch, which shows the location of this site in terms of its proximity and its importance to this beachfront environment. You can see here, this is the site location. The site itself is actually a waste transfer station, and it collects, it's the kind of deposit really for all of the waste that's collected across the beach. It's brought back to this site and sorted and then taken away for recycling. So it's a very important kind of sustainable centre for the beachfront. There was a lifeguard station just on the cliff top, as well as some public toilets and some beach huts in the original site. So you can see here the kind of original context of the site. You can see the top of the photo on the left here, which shows the waste transfer station with the tractors and vans located in there, as well as the public toilets and some of the old beach huts, and then the lifeguard station, which is just on top of the cliff and is called an old modular building. And here's just a view out from our centre. So the real brief for this site was about the kind of huge volumes of litter that are deposited on the beachfront every year, and the council's drive to alter their change in thinking, as well as trying to alter create change in the public's way of thinking in terms of throwing away litter and keeping the beaches clean. They wanted to create an improved welfare facility for the people working on the beach, collecting this rubbish and all the other jobs they do throughout the area, as well as educate the public and create a step change in thinking across the beachfront. It also involved replacement of public toilets, kiosk, and this kind of approach really led us to think about waste in a lot more key role, and trying to use natural materials, create a sustainable building that really reflected the brief and wore its eco credentials on its sleeve. So that's the kind of direction we wanted to start with, and this kind of really started getting us thinking about how we approach design, and we wanted to create a kind of overall approach to the process that kind of led our design decision makings throughout, from concept forming through to material choices and operational use. And it was about doing less and building efficiently, but really we wanted to create this kind of hierarchy of decision making. So every time we had a decision to make for a design process, we would reflect back to our overarching criteria, which would be to primarily replant the space, reduce as much as we could, recover where we can, and then reuse and finally recycle. We try to apply that process through the concept stage of designing, as well as our detailing and material choices, and also during the construction process. So I'll go through those points throughout these slides, just to give you an understanding of how we ended up here. So these are some historic photos of the area. We always try and design in context and understand the site's history. There's a lot of vegetation on the site, lots of gorse and grasses. The formation of the cliff profile is obviously quite prominent in this site, and it has influenced us quite heavily throughout the design process, as well as obviously the tones of the cliff geology and the sands and the sea beyond. This kind of natural landscape is really kind of key in decision making, in terms of wanting to work with natural materials, steering away from plastics wherever we could. You can see here another historic photo showing the waste transfer centre on the right, which has been there for around 100 years, I believe. There are a green roofed beach hut structures in the background, which is part of our current site. You can see the kind of cliff formation, the way it's kind of sloping up from the chine itself, has played a big role in our decision making. So we wanted to respond to these natural formations, and we decided one of the early kind of ideas would be to infill the cliff. It's kind of an interesting formation where it currently is. We're a bit of a cutout from the cliff, and we wanted to introduce a new form which would infill that space and create a twisting roof to reflect the cliff behind, so that every decision we're making is about responding to replanting. We also wanted to reflect the geology of the cliff behind, and the vegetation that sits along it, as well as respond to some of the human interventions along that front. So we initially looked at locating areas where we would replant. So where the original lifeguard station was located, we've taken that away and fully rewilded that area to improve cliff stability and the ecology along the cliff top. We've tried to integrate green roofs throughout the building. This has helped with our sustainable drainage, as well as obviously the ecology of the site. And we've also integrated planters and holes in the roof wherever we can, bring that kind of landscape back into the building as well. Throughout the site, there's also various bat boxes, sparrow boxes, and other ecological introductions. And you can see here during the construction formation of that roof, how it kind of ties into the cliff behind. And again, in context, the twisting roof of that canopy sitting in front of the cliff and in filling that space. You can also see the tones of the sand and the stratum of the cliff behind, and how that is reflected in the smaller buildings to the left, which are layered up in a toned concrete, low carbon concrete, to reflect the geological stratum. So another kind of priority that we looked at was about reducing and how we reduce our built interventions. We wanted to reflect the man-made context of the site, which is primarily being of small structures, beach huts, small buildings, and how we kind of how that tied into that priority of reducing. So we kind of broke our concept down into small functions. Really, we looked at the individual functions of the brief and worked out how that we could prioritize these into spaces, so we could build less, improve the efficiency of the buildings that we do build, create more outdoor space, and use less material. So you can see here that we've created 220 square meters of exhibition space, which is outside space. We obviously enabled us to build with a lot less material, with less running costs, but also it enabled the exhibition space to be a kind of interactive space. It connected with the beachfront a lot more closely, and obviously didn't have a doorway break that would stop passers-by from entering. The toilets are a single structure, so internal and external finishes are the structure, and they're an unheated space. The kiosk is very low energy running costs and open fronted with radiant heat panels. And the education and welfare facilities for the waste transfer centre are a Passive House certified structure. So these smaller buildings all played a part in terms of reflecting the context of the site, but also enabled us to reduce material use, as well as improving the efficiency of the buildings on site. And we also looked at reducing our material choices and looking at natural materials. We've managed to achieve a A+ rating in budding carbon. We looked at reducing our site in terms of off-site construction, which Seascape will talk about later. And of course, then recovery was our next priority. And the big part of this project was about what we could use in the local area. And all across the beachfront are these timber groin structures, which are the sea defence for Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch Beach. These are replaced every 20 to 30 years, and we managed to reclaim 45 tonnes of these for secondary structure and cladding in the building, as well as 7 tonnes of submarine-based decking from Germany. And these have helped the building really sit within the context and kind of weather instantly. As you can see here, the cladding has been used from offcuts from those groins, as well as formations of batt boxes and the secondary structure of the roof canopy. And then we turned to recover and see how we could recover as much as we could, obviously just in terms of materials, but in terms of energy. We have a passive house building, which is mechanically ventilated, heat recovery, passive cooling, and we have solar gains and winter solar gains, as well as 90 square meters of PV panels, which is all designed to achieve a 100% regulated energy use. And then reuse. There were some elements of reuse throughout the building where we used secondhand shipping containers for the welfare facilities, for storage. But it was really, this building was about an instigator for the beachfront change. It's kind of helped BCP create step changes in their decision making. They've introduced, since this project, water refill stations throughout the beachfront. Kiosks, which are all run by BCP, have introduced plastic reusable cups, as well as sustainable food packaging choices. And then recycle, as well as recycling the building at the end, was an important part for this project. We have introduced fixing details, for instance, on the canopy, which enable the building to be taken down again in the future, and materials to be reused again. We've used recycled plastic bottle tops throughout all of the toilets, and warm cell insulation, which is a recycled newspaper, is throughout the passive house building, as well as recycled glass in the screeding of the flooring. And you can see in these photos the kind of detail and the context of that reused timber, which helped the building nestle into the background. Touched on earlier about the geology of the cliff behind, and the response to that was to create these smaller structures out of a layered concrete. So these are the public toilets and the kiosk buildings. They're used with a reduced cement content, as well as GGBS replacement, and we developed them to also have a hugely reduced rebar in them, so that we could make them more durable and then reuse them in the future to much more. The concrete is layered, and then each layer is brushed to expose a different aggregate, and that reflects the kind of the stratum of the cliffs behind. And you can see the building there in its context. And again, night. And I'll just play a quick little video. Thank you. I'll now pass over to Monica.
Thank you very much, Mike. Just to remind everyone about the Q&A, we'd love to hear questions from anybody watching. Thanks.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see that. That's great.
So hi everyone, I'm Monica and I work for WSP. I will be presenting the structural side of this project. Just a bit about WSP. We are a leading multidisciplinary professional service consultancy, and we provide engineering and environmental services from strategic advisory and planning through to design and delivery. We do focus a lot on sustainability and future-proofing our cities and environment. Our collaboration, flexibility, and responsiveness means we integrate our teams effectively and proactively to add value to clients from day one. And we do share knowledge and insight at every stage of the project. And I do think that the Lichine is an example of all of those things. During this presentation, I will be talking about two themes. First of which is the challenge. As Mike said, we had to challenge the brief, and this is something that we need to do for all of our projects. But how do we actually do it? How do we challenge the clients and find new innovative ways to design responsibly? We do still have a long way to go as an industry and move towards what we call circular economy and actually actively challenging every design. The Lichine, however, is a shining example of how challenging the client and the brief can lead to more efficient and sustainable design while maintaining and I would dare say improving on the original building functions. Part of the challenging of the brief was recognizing the different spaces that we had and their requirements and intended purposes. For example, the exhibition space, it was a completely outdoor space, and it did include quite a unique canopy design. Then we had the education and welfare, which was a two-story timber building, which had to be designed to passive house. And then the third one was the kiosk and toilet space, which is unheated space, small single-story unreinforced concrete buildings. As you can see, all of them are quite different from each other. So this meant that we had to think outside of the box and include a lot of innovative designs. And one of them was low carbon concrete, which can sound a bit controversial, but actually it did save us embodied carbon. How did we actually do that? Well, first, the first thing was something that we discussed with Footprint Architects, the way that they wanted the building to match its surrounding, which meant that we can use raw concrete and save on finishes. Because of the nature of the buildings, they were not that high, not very high, there wasn't very high loading on them. So we didn't actually require reinforcement. And that actually allowed us to use higher cement replacement content. And in the end, we actually managed to save 40% of the original carbon just from the concrete walls. And this is an example of the difference that it made having unreinforced to reinforced walls, which is something that people wouldn't think initially, but actually it made sense for us and it worked really well with this project and with the high cement replacement content. Also, something that probably wouldn't be the first idea, we actually found out that having thicker walls allowed us to not have reinforcement, and also to ultimately lower our embodied carbon. We even tried to challenge the foundations. Unfortunately, this was not successful. We still had to have foundations, but it was interesting to just see how far we can push the design. Our biggest innovation was using reclaimed timber. We all knew from the beginning that we wanted to use timber as our main material. Various approaches were considered in terms of efficiency, but that didn't happen. The team actually came across a large council-managed stockpile of timber groins just along the beach from the site. And this set in motion a whole process which actually defined the project itself. The reclaimed timber has been used for the secondary roof structure, brise-soleil, and cladding, and the decking. The groins are constructed from a combination of Greenheart and Eki, which are both durable tropical hardwoods suitable for marine applications. So we knew that they had the strength for what we were designing. We did have issues that we had to overcome with the use of reclaimed timber. We had to develop a very close relationship with Trada, who helped us on assessing, selecting, and grading the timber that we had available. Once they knew the length and thickness of the available stock, the design of the canopy, as well as that of the cladding, was adapted to correspond the spans of the wood. And the whole WSP team did everything to minimize unnecessary resizing and machining, and ensure that as much strength was derived from the groins as possible. This was with its challenges, especially for the hyperbolic canopy roof, where a lot of the members were quite unique in terms of sizing, and we did have to design unique connections for every beam and rafter. Durability was also another problematic thing, because how do you actually say what would be the durability of already used timber? We decided that structural components that would be well protected wouldn't have a problem with that. And those would be the rafters, for example, those would be the rafters supporting the roof. But for primary structure, uprights, and for the primary roof structure, it was decided to actually use new timber, which was 100% FSC certified. Also, another thing that we had to have in mind was that Greenheart, which we had here, was toxic to people. So we couldn't risk, the risk from splinters was too high. And that is why we have used reclaimed timber from Germany for the decking. And yeah, it was quite challenging, but very, very unique project, which I think ended up showcasing very good collaboration and which actually brings me to our the second theme in this presentation, which is relationships. All of the innovations, changes that I've talked about until now, and all that was achieved throughout the project was possible because of the relationships we've already had or established along the way. On the screen, you can see just some of the people or businesses involved in this project. And the key to the success of the project was our early involvement. working closely with all of the parties involved to see what is possible and to support each other, because ultimately we all had shared goals and we wanted to see this project succeed, because it's a quite unique to have such kind of a project as like a public one, and to know that you're doing this for the people and it will be used for everyone. And the main conclusions is that we need to be thinking about our environment, and we can do that through challenging the brief, challenging our clients, but we can't do it on our own. We need to have good relationship, we need to have partners, and we need to work together. And Dirty Shine shows that it is possible, it can be done, even if it's not perfect in from all angles. It is still better than anything else, and it would actually be there for generations to come. So that's all from me. Thank you. And I'll now pass on to Matt and Pete.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to do an introduction to the project setup here at BCP, and I will then pass over to Pete. So BCP have been running an internal contracting department team for around 10 years. As far as we're aware, there's no other council in the UK that that run an internal contracting arm with the ability to do the projects like Durley. We work for all departments across BCP, but Seafront certainly probably one of our biggest clients. We also have Seascape, so we work as a BCP department working for other departments, and then we can work outside of BCP through our Seascape arm, which you can see on the slides. We did this project as a BCP department for another BCP department being a Seafront. Due to the complexities of Dirty Shine development, having this relationship, this internal relationship, ensured the successful completion, amongst many other things, but certainly that relationship was the key. We had the ability to review the design, the associated costs in depth, and have that open book approach, which enabled us to look at all options across the project design, and it enabled us, as Monica had said, a really strong collaborative approach, which avoided the standard contract to client relationship that you get in the normal setup. We also brought our experience track record of successfully completing numerous passive house projects, and as has been mentioned, we achieved certified status on this project. We also have a large team of directly employed trades. This strength really came through in the Durley project. They really took a lot of pride, ownership of the project, knowing that it was for us to be on the seafront for years and years to come. And our in-house groundwork team took on the layered concrete, which you've seen in some of the images. We had a nightmare trying to find somebody to do that. So along with a local formwork subcontractor, our in-house groundwork team did all of that. And apart from the SIP panels to the education building, our in-house carpentry team took on all the timber elements of the project. Certainly challenged them, but virtually every single one of them still to this day says it was the proudest job that they've ever done. As a chippy, they loved it. Of the works that we did subcontract, nearly 95% were local companies, and they were all within a 50-mile radius. So we're pleased with that. I'll pass you over to Pete now, who will be going into a bit more detail on the timber side.
Thanks, Matt. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah, you're all good.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Matt, for passing it over. Just before we start on the timber things, there's a few bits there that Mike and Monica have also alluded to with other aspects of the project, which are ecologically friendly. That I'll pass on for those. As we mentioned, the education building was built using SIP panels, and these are the SIP panels arriving on 2 lorry loads. These were manufactured off-site, and on 2 lorries, they're craned into place. External walls, internal walls, the floor, and the roof were all installed within 3 days. So it really pushed the program on for us. Next slide just shows a bit more of the same of the panels being lifted into place. As has previously been mentioned, BCP has a program of replacement groins over the 7 miles of seafront that we have. The old groins are lifted out of the sea and stored at a location close to within the BCP area, and they're allowed to air dry for future reuse. This is a mixture of Greenheart and Eki timber. The strength graded was done by BM Trada, and we weren't able to reuse any metal content or large knots within the timber. All these timbers were collected and cut and finished by a local timber mill based about 30 miles away at Salisbury, and this was based on a cutting list produced by our own carpentry team. Just as an example of how much timber we use, Mike gave a tonnage weight of timber, but for another clarification, another way of thinking how much timber we actually used, for the cladding for the education building was 3,800 meters of timber. For the decking subframe was 550 meters of timber. Balustrades, spindles, handrails and posts was another 700 meters. And the louvers for the brise-soleil on the education building was 115 meters. So it just gives an indication of the amount of timber that was reused on this project. These two photographs show the cladding to the education building. You can see it was a castellated form, so you had 150 mil widths of timber fixed to the battens, on top of which were 100 mil widths of timber to get the castellated effect. On the right-hand photograph is the finished effect of the cladding to the education building. You can see the two back boxes at the top of the building, and in the foreground you can see the reclaimed Eki and Greenheart timber that would be used for the timber, the decking subbase. Also some brackets shown there as well. This is the view from the education building of the what's going to be the decking area and the canopy. Again, just showing the amount of timber that was reused from groins to be used for the subframe of the decking area. Now onto the canopy, which is probably one of the most more complex aspects of the project. We sourced the timber through a timber merchant in London, who in turn worked with a company in Holland called Hupkes, now called Wiesma, and this is some of the drawings that they produced for us as part of their work. Numerous Zoom calls were made between the merchant, Hupkes, footprint architect, WSP, to ensure that what we had delivered to site was a one-stop shop. We did not have the time. Bear in mind these timbers were machined in Holland and sent over to get any replacement timbers if anything was wrong. This 3D image that we were able to get from Hupkes was extremely useful to our site carpentry team, who wholly undertook the erection of the structural beams and posts of the project. These are the timbers arrived newly on site directly from Holland. And this was structural FSC Eki. Just note the precise location of the bolt holes and the milled grooves in the timbers. We did look into the possibility of using reclaimed timbers for the structure, but BM Trada were unable to provide assurance of either structural integrity or longevity of any recycled groin timbers for this element of the works. These were the only new timbers used in the whole of this project. A view there of this lovely sunny Bournemouth. The sun always shines in Bournemouth, so they say. It's not quite true, but this also shows the view down towards Sandbanks, Millionaires Row. Photograph taken from the roof, and you see sort of the rake of the roof with the structural timbers, as Mike alluded to earlier. And it was the number of fixings that we're needed to hold all this framework together. Another view there, this is looking towards Bournemouth Pier and beyond towards Boscombe, looking the other way on the roof. And again, just emphasizes the rake of the roof up to the top corner. In the foreground is reclaimed timber groins used as purlins. This is a view from underneath the roof onto what would end up being the decking area. Note the V sections of timbers, that these were solely individuals with very, very minor degree differentials between them. They had to be in the right place, otherwise the frame would not go together. Over the whole of the span, there's a 20-meter span widthwise of this canopy. There was a 1 millimeter tolerance over 20 meters. It all went together, and we only needed to use one sledgehammer to drive in one bolt. It was a few sleepless nights, but it went together. These are just some of the galvanized steel fixings that were produced for this project. These were produced locally in Poole. Obviously, we had the combination of the timber being milled and machined in Holland and the brackets being produced in Poole. So we sent a sample of each bracket over to Holland, and from that they used as a template to machine the timber. It shows the timber decking has been previously mentioned. This was reclaimed timber from a naval shipyard in Germany. This is Basra Locus. Again, this was all machined and milled in Holland. Also note the old groins that were used as posts for the balustrade to the front of the project. And again, as seen here from the outside looking in. This point just shows the complexity of the location of the project on a seafront location. Obviously, paramount importance was to make sure that the public had safe and easy access across the front of the site. But it certainly showed up its complexities and difficulties. And lastly, a nice evening shot to finish with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think now we're going to bring in Zoe and have a bit more of a sort of panel discussion. I think you've unmuted yourself, Zoe. But thanks to everybody for some great presentations. It's a fantastic project. So I mean, Matt kind of touched on this when he was speaking, but I sort of wanted to ask Zoe a bit more about the relationship with Seascape and you know how much of a factor that was. I mean, do you think this is the sort of project that couldn't have happened in quite the same way were it not for that unique kind of setup?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being able to work so closely and openly with Seascape really helped drive this project forward. I don't think we would have had the same outcome if we'd gone through a different route. It was just, you know, the complexities, the timescales. You know, it was grant funded as well, so we had requirements of when we were going to deliver the building. And all the environmental constraints of the site as well. So Pete mentions like the public, it's a really, you could see how close it was to Bournemouth Pier as well. And in the summer that gets crazy down there. So yeah, being able to work with Seascape has that, you know, really made that project very successful, I think.
Mm. And why is it so unusual to have that kind of relationship? Why aren't there more instances of that, you know, up and down the UK?
Good question. I actually don't know the answer to that. But yeah, I think it's just so I joined BCP Council about 4 years ago now, and it was just a real bonus to find that we had our own in-house team that we can work with, and we work really well together. So I think Mike mentioned that the lifeguards moved from that site, so we've got another project just down a few hundred meters down the seafront where we're rebuilding a site for those lifeguards now, and that's the Seascape are leading on that one as well.
Oh right, fantastic. We've got quite a few questions that have come in, but I was also wanted to ask about about a bit of end of life stuff, and you know, it's great that it was a, you know, demountable project, and it just occurred to me, I was wondering how that is kind of communicated, because obviously, you know, people move, you know, what is there to ensure that knowledge of how to sort of demount it, and the fact that it can be taken apart and that these screws were used is kind of there for, you know, the right people to know about it when the time comes. And, you know, that's a sort of question for anybody who wants to answer it, I suppose.
So just to kick it off, so our seafront operations team have taken on the maintenance of that building. So they were very much involved through the project, one of our key stakeholders. So they have access to the information. They kind of were brought along in the kind of design process. So they're very much embedded into the kind of future of that building as well.
I'm hoping our O&M documentation as well is pretty detailed. So the 3D drawing that you saw Pete show, that will be included in all of that, so they can deconstruct it using that information, the as-built drawings from WSP and footprint they would have on file, which they get sent across. So all that information's there if they were to choose to do that. We hope they don't. I hope it's there for a long time.
Yeah. Great. We had a lot of technical questions, which I think are sort of being answered as they sort of pop up, and I think we can share the answers with everybody. So, you know, there are questions about lateral stability and things that people the panelists have been great at answering. There was one that we said we would answer publicly, which was about the level of the external timber. Which was that it appears to go to ground level rather than 150 mils above ground level. So the question had been, you know, about moisture and whether that had been treated in that particular instance, because that's in continuous contact with the ground. So that's one for anybody to answer, really.
So I mean, I think most of the timber of the timber of the building, as well as the structure of the decking, is all raised off the ground. There's a small plinth element which runs along the front of the decking, which we made the decision to use as a sort of a sacrificial enclosure. But it is all timber from the groins, which have been in the water for the last 20 years. It doesn't absorb really any moisture. I think there may be a couple of millimeters it will absorb, and then it doesn't retain it. So it's extremely durable from a moisture content point of view. And in terms of treating that timber, again, the treatment wouldn't absorb into the wood to any degree. So becomes slightly redundant.
Yeah, there were quite a few questions actually about the wood, which the panelists have been great at answering. I think most of the answers kind of relate to the fact that these groins have been doing a very good job for 20 or 30 years. So they've got sort of no problem continuing to sort of do that. And the fact that different new wood was used for the primary structure as opposed to the secondary. So we'll share all of that. I suppose, yeah, coming back to Zoe, more general question is, how did the project kind of evolve from the brief? I'm thinking particularly in terms of sustainability and reuse of material. Was that a kind of, fantastic, pleasant surprise for you, Zoe, the way the sort of project ended up going, and how much was sustainability really embedded in it from the start?
So I have to admit, so I came into the project when it had got planning permission, but I know from my colleagues who kind of were key, because it's funded by the Coastal Communities Fund. So in the kind of the whole background of that application was about not only addressing the waste management issue that we've got on the seafront, but also about having this kind of developing a low carbon, low impact building and setting a benchmark for how the council can pursue development in line with their own aspirations going forward. So I think, yes, so it was sustainability, I would say, was embedded quite early on, but the way it's evolved, I think it's been, from a personal point of view, very exciting to see all the additions and extras that kind of became part of that design as we went forward.
Great. And I was sort of wondering about the differing kind of functions of the project and how, you know, were there any sort of concerns over, well, you know, the fact that it has to have this, you know, properly utilitarian function at the same time as, you know, having the exhibition space in terms of health and safety, in terms of kind of compartmentalizing things.
Yeah, in that scenario, I think the compartmentalization, really did help us in the fact that, you know, we had public space, we had welfare areas that could be lockable from the public space. We had, you know, the site is secure oversight. It's, you know, there's plenty of deterrence there, but there's also then the public toilets which can be left open longer than the rest of the site. I think one of the kind of issues that we did have was about the waste transfer yard and the Environment Agency license around that and how that needed to be managed versus our sustainable urban drainage approach, and having to make sure that, you know, there was kind of separation of that site physically in terms of ensuring that no pollutants would be getting into any watercourses, and so that, you know, we had to renew our license anyway because of the volumes that are being collected. So I think Mike said, yeah, it's about 2,000 tons a year. So it kind of helped us kind of reconfigure that waste transfer yard as well to kind of make improvements in that.
I really enjoyed actually reading about the project, the sort of economical way, the sort of economical approach to kind of heating and insulation, and the sort of coming back to compartmentalization, that tricky word to say again. It was really sort of satisfying to sort of see that you'd considered the different functions that each separate element was going to have in order, I suppose, to get such a, you know, high performing building out of it. Sort of brings me on to ask, the exhibition space outside, was the idea always that would be an exhibition space and that it would always be outside, or was that something that evolved as part of the project?
So Mike, you might have to jump in here, but
Yeah.
from my understanding, the idea was always to have an exhibition space, but I think it did evolve into that kind of open, kind of inside out space as well.
Yeah, so the exhibition space was always part of the brief, as well as education areas. But the kind of decision to bring it outside was developed with our kind of strategy of working out what could be removed and reduced. And so we kind of put together a proposal to BCP and said, you know, this could be an outside space. What do you think of that? And it, you know, it could have some other benefits to it in terms of being more accessible to the public, and so they were really on board with that from the beginning. But yeah, that was kind of an evolved process through the design stage.
Great. And I suppose I'll sort of ask something just a bit more open. I mean, we've had a lot of technical questions that sort of relate to the engineering side of things from lots of people. I'm just wondering if anybody from the panel who's answered some of those questions behind the scenes wants to single out any of them, because clearly there's interest from 4 or 5 of the attendees. So would anybody like to share any of the things that they've answered just out loud?
Yep, I can have a go at this.
Thank you, Monica.
Well, one of the questions that's coming up quite a lot is the durability of the timber and design life, which is a bit of a, it is a complicated question with a complicated answer. We can't give a specific design life for the timber just because of the environment that it's in. We made sure that we've used new timber for all of the main structural elements, so we know that it has it won't have any problems if it's maintained correctly. And then for all of the reclaimed timber, it is in places where it's either very well protected or it can be easily replaced. And that's how we ensure the client and we're actually able to do the design. So I can't answer it in terms of years, but this is basically how we got around that. And also there was a question about the foundations from someone. The soil that we had on site, it was suitable for more conventional type of foundations, shallow type of foundations. But there is a public ground sewer going beneath the site and along it. So we choose piled foundations just to minimize, so we can minimize the amount of ground excavations needed on site. So that was one of the reasons that we ended up with piled foundations. And yeah, in terms of something that was also coming up quite a lot was the software that was used. The software modeling was done in Robot. Individual members were checked in TEDS, and we did use TEDS for the wind loading. But also I can say that the team went above and beyond in creating specific spreadsheets in order to do all of the timber connections, and that was done, and those calculations were done by hand without the use of any specific software. So yeah, I hope this answers the questions. Yeah.
Great, thanks very much, Monica. Just a couple of final questions about wood, appropriately enough, about the Eki. When it came to the new Eki, how was that sourced? And was it easy to source?
Pete?
We did source it through a merchant based in London, but we did go out to the market and find someone who could supply. Some people could supply but wouldn't mill it, so to find somebody who could supply it and do all the milling and machining for us was quite hard. So the timber merchant we found were extremely good. It's really useful, and again, working with hookers was a very, very good process. But it had to be FSC certified, obviously, as Monica alluded to, for the structural strength of that and the grading of that.
And I was also wondering about the wood sourced from Germany that was used from, I didn't quite understand it, from a submarine. What was the?
It came from a submarine base in Germany, and then obviously prepared and milled in Holland, and then came to us.
How did you even hear of that in the first place?
I think that came
through Hupke, wasn't it?
Yeah,
through the Dutch timber suppliers. So it was the retaining wall to a dry dock in a German submarine base, and it just come up with all the paperwork. Somebody did ask in the questions, why didn't we use something from the UK? So we did have a couple of offers, but it just didn't have the trail that we were looking for to show that it's been recycled and been taken raw in that form. So this was the best that we could find that come in the raw form, because obviously if we could have got it locally, like we were getting the groins from the beach in front of us, we would have done that. But that was the best that we could find that had the paperwork to prove that it was being fully recycled.
I think the other consideration for the decking timber was the actual timber itself. Bear in mind it's a beachfront location. You probably potentially have people walking on there with barefoot. So we had to find a suitable timber that would be ideal for that location, and Basra Locus fitted that.
Great. Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think at that point we need to wrap it up. So I'm just going to say a big thank you to all of the panelists today. Some great presentations and a great project. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Oops, hang on. Yeah. Bear with me a second. So yes, just to tell you about what's coming up, we have the Black and White building as our next webinar on Wednesday, the 10th of April. We'll be hearing from Wall Thistleton Architects, Eckersley O'Callaghan, and clients, the Office Group. It's a truly fantastic project, deservedly award-winning. So we hope to see you all back then. You can find information on how to reserve your place on the Timber Development UK website. Thanks again to the panel. Thanks to all the attendees for coming along. And I will say goodbye. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.